But that's not necessarily the platform. You're talking more about, we'll transition to that. They're doing, probably a lot of them are doing more like this. This is the get to know the author. This is the, if you go look at a blog post that I do, it'll be like, this is when I was breaking in, here was a fun story about me, or I've read this book and here's me talking about it. You would have very little interest in that if it wasn't me writing it. And that's the sort of thing they're doing with the video blogs, is making themselves more out there. Now, this is probably, the next level down from doing this is doing this. You put extra content about your books. You have a FAQ where you answer questions. You have a blog where, here's a reader mail submission. It's about you and your books. No one's going to want to read this except people who've already read your books. And it can be effective, time-wise, in that this is for people, once your books are out, to help you kind of generate some momentum. If you don't have time for this or this sort of thing, you can move to this. This is kind of like the do one blog post a week and make it like, an interesting question that a fan asked you that you didn't answer, or something like that. This, basically, they're blogging more than once a week. If they are blogging only once a week, they are writing a really in-depth, interesting blog post that would be of interest to people who had never heard of them before.
So it sounds like most of these authors you're mentioning, they blog about things that are not directly related to their books.
Yes.
Is it possible to even do like more than one blog on different topics?
Yes, but boy, that's kind of shredding yourself thin. And do remember, they do, like, for instance, Larry Correia is writing books about gun nuts shooting monsters, and he's gun nuts. Cory Doctorow is writing books about people fighting against the government establishment. His big series is Little Brother and the new one that just came out. Both are New York Times bestsellers. They're YA books. He's got one about gold farmers in China on MMOs staging a revolution and stuff like that. It's very similar to what he's blogging about, but it's not the same. Scalzi, I don't know what the heck Scalzi's doing, but that's Scalzi. He does blog on science fiction and fantasy writing topics and things like that, but more he's just interesting, so people read his stuff.
So how did your site get started? What were the steps you took to get that?
I did this after I was published. I didn't worry about a website before. Once I got published, I'm like, all right, let's put up some information. And that's, if you go to their websites, I need a new one. We're working on it, but mine can be a few years old. It doesn't really matter. If people are visiting, it's because they already know who I am and they want to read my blog. If you go to, Boing Boing, you're wanting it to be, if it looks outdated, that's a bad thing because it's a tech blog and a pop culture blog. You know what I mean? Like, there's a difference there. So this is the next level. The next level down, there's actually one down here. This is the minimum effort online marketing thing. Minimum. Have a static web page about your book where it can be bought, a little biography of you, and things like that. So that when people say, who is this person, they go, they find some information. If you are not going to update regularly, do not indicate that you're going to, okay? This is a big mistake. Don't put, under construction or more content coming. If someone comes to your website and your latest blog post is 2 years old, that looks really bad. If they come to the website and it's a static page that says, here is me and my books, that is eternal, right? Doesn't matter. So if you're not going to do this, don't promise that you're going to. It's going to hurt you. All right, makes sense? So, breaking over in the other direction, there are all these social media things. Social media, kind of the buzzwords of today's culture, right? These can be very helpful, can be very useful. It's kind of like this stuff. Usually, if you're going to be doing this, you will have a Twitter feed. You will have a Facebook page. What are the new kids doing? Is it still Facebook and Twitter?
Facebook and Twitter. Oh, Tumblr as well.
Tumblr. They're going to have a Tumblr. That's what the new. That's like. I bet there's a new one that the new kids are discovering. But Tumblr is what the next generation. Yeah, you're going to have some of those things, and you're going to pick them. Don't use probably LiveJournal, though I like LiveJournal. It's kind of like 7 generations before. But LiveJournal's fun. But yeah, social media, you'll want to be doing some social media stuff. George R. R. Martin still uses his LiveJournal. And so it's just fine. But, you know, be on some of those things. And if there's any special sort of information you can add, you can post them there. But again, it takes time. Is this the sort of thing you want to put time into? Most of the time, something like Twitter, for instance, people are only going to follow you for two reasons. Either you are writing interesting stuff about a topic they're interested in, or you are a raw author they like to read, and so they want to see what you write, what you tweet about your books and things like that, and decide what your Twitter feed is going to be if you're going to put one up. I mirror my Facebook and my Twitter with, you know, Facebook, Twitter, and Google Plus all get the same posts. That's of ease for me. Some of the authors who are a little bit more extreme are doing new information for each social media section, you know, based on what they think that social media is good at doing. Okay? This is not, now, if this is your goal, you should start this right now. If this is your goal, maybe get the static page up, but don't worry about anything else. Or if you're going to do a hybrid, if this is your goal, ignore it until you have something for people to buy. Okay? But this, I would say, would be the minimum. All right? You can put tons of effort into this. There are lots of other things you can do for self-promotion. One of the things that people like to do these days, I don't know how effective these are. This started after I broke in, are blog tours. Rather than going on a tour, which is really expensive, you will contact other bloggers and you will write an interesting piece. And you will say, hey, here's some examples of interesting pieces that I write that I posted on my blog. Do you mind if I do a guest blog? I'll give you a guest blog on this topic, which your readers might find interesting. You go contact some blogs with a decent readership that you think you can approach doing on, and you write guest pieces for them and do a blog tour. I don't know how effective this is, but a lot of people seem to do it. It's something to consider, particularly if you can write interesting blog posts about a variety of topics. Another thing that you can do, people used to do mailings. You can't really do mailings anymore. You can do them to independent booksellers. You can't do them to Barnes & Noble, really. But you can go visit your local Barnes & Noble, or any Barnes & Noble you pass, or any independent bookseller you pass, just while you're on vacation or whatever. You can drop off a copy of your book and give it to the manager or to the person in charge of that department. I always gave it, I said, is there a sci-fi reader on your staff? If there is, I gave him a copy of my book. I pitched it to him and said, if I give you this, will you promise to read it? And that worked fairly well. Now, my book was in the bookstores for sale, so they could hand sell the copies they had on the shelves. If your book is self-published, that's not going to work so well for you, unless you're trying to convince the manager to stock your book. Okay? That's one thing you can consider. You'll probably want to have some sort of little giveaway for your signings. You really don't need to, but people expect it, like a bookmark or something. I don't know how effective these are. Everybody always has bookmarks. I don't know. You guys go to signings, you get all the bookmarks. What do you do with them? Does anyone use them?
If I don't lose them, yes.
Yeah. So some of you use them. They might be useful, but you know, it's expected that you probably have one of these. They're fairly cheap, so you just give them out. You know, at your book signings. Signings. So if you're self-published, getting into the bookstores is difficult. You might be able to convince a local bookstore to carry a few of your books. You're more likely to get them to have a signing for you where they'll sell the books on consignment, which means you bring them in, you sell them, they take a cut, and then pay you, you know, what's left over. And if it sells well and does well, then maybe they'll carry a copy and put it on the shelves. If you are self-published, though, your best bet is to do online marketing and not to worry about the print editions too much. Selling 15 extra copies through hours and hours of effort to get them into bookstores is probably not going to be worth your effort nearly as much as writing one cool blog post that gets reblogged and tweeted around that points out to your website, which has links to your ebooks. That's going to be my guess. Okay? Yes?
Is it like in blogging, is it looked down on if you have like a Blogspot blog, or like do you need to purchase a domain name?
Once you get popular, yes, you should probably. But like I said, George R. R. Martin The biggest writer in fantasy today uses LiveJournal. Okay? So,
Well, he's also a little older, so he can
yeah.
get away with that.
So, and I'm sure there are others. Yeah. A web domain is $8. I mean, it's not like you should probably go buy your name if that's what you're planning to do, and just have your name and put something up on it. You should probably at least consider that. Yeah.
What about using Kickstarter to help?
Do not use Kickstarter to help. All right. Here's the problem. All right. If you've got a cool thing that you want to build for people, Kickstarter it, fine. I am very against authors using Kickstarter that do not already have an established reputation, because they don't know the quality of what you're creating. And that falls kind of under the Kickstarter says, don't use Kickstarter to fund your life. Okay? In other words, you're not supposed to use Kickstarter to get tuition. You're not supposed to use Kickstarter for all these kinds of things. Now, technically, writing a book is probably okay to Kickstarter, but if you've got a finished product that's an ebook that they can read and you're going to do a Kickstarter for a hard copy, that's okay. Do not have them Kickstarter you to pay you before you write your book. I think that is abusing Kickstarter. Number one, you're probably going to fail. Number two, it's kind of abusing Kickstarter. Write a good book. Get it out there. If it starts to take off, then say, let's do a Kickstarter for a hard copy, hardcover. That can be awesome. Does that make sense? You see the difference between those two things? I want you to prove to the readers that you're worth being Kickstarted before you do it. All right? That's a personal opinion. You could disagree with me on that one. So yeah. Let's talk about, okay, we already talked about the conventions as publicity. Let's just go ahead and move on to the next topic. Anything else on self-promotion? It's not something you need to think about a lot, but I feel like you should have something in your notes about this for when you do publish what you're going to do with it.
How do you approach a bookstore or an organization about doing a signing?
If you are published through a mainstream publisher, you can ask your publicist to get a signing for you. It has varying results, but usually you'll end up getting one locally. I, in the past, for all my local stores, have gone in, asked to meet the community relations manager. That's the BNN term, or whoever's in charge of events. Prove to them that you have a book that they would be interested in selling.
Here's my driver's license.
No, it's more like, yeah, this book is on your shelves. I'm a local author. Can we do a signing? If you're in children's, King's English does a lot of those in Salt Lake. If you're an adult, then Sam Weller does a lot of those. BYU Bookstore is another great place to have events. All the bookstores around here are pretty awesome. They're very skeptical of self-published books because a lot of people do that. If you are self-published, you might ask locally to the Barnes & Noble like in Orem, hey, can I be part of your next author palooza? That's when they get like 20 authors together. And they'll probably say yes to you on that, because even if you only bring 2 people in, they don't have to do like a lot just for you because they're already doing this big thing. And if they have 30 authors and some of them only bring 2 people in, well, it's still creating this big event. Does that make sense? If you're actually, you've been published and they're carrying your book already, it's much easier to get a book signing. And I just walk in and ask them, community relations manager, locally. You're not supposed to, but I do. Okay?